Good evening. Again, my name is Jocelyn Diaz-Valdez. I work at UW-Madison's Financial Aid Office. I am happy to be here. Thank you, especially on a Wednesday evening, to be here joining us tonight after probably a long day says a lot. So I hope this information is relevant, important to you. Please know I also speak Spanish, so happy to answer questions in either English or Spanish afterwards. A few things I want to share about financial aid before we get started. One is, what is financial aid? And I know I'm probably speaking to a crowd that totally gets this, but every now and then I'll have maybe a student in the crowd that's like, what is the purpose of financial aid? It's basically money to help pay for college. It's a way of creating access to higher education. I would not be where I am, my family would not be where we are if it weren't for the role of higher education in our lives. So I am a strong believer in sharing this information, and I'm very passionate about it. Please know I live in the community, so if you ever see me, whether it be at Metro Market or anywhere else, feel free to stop me. I'm happy to connect with you, whether your student is planning on coming to UW-Madison or not. I'd be happy to answer questions. The other thing, if you will just indulge me for a second, we're not going to do anything weird, I promise you, but will you close your eyes for just a second? I want you to think about your student. If you are the student, you're going to have a different assignment. But if you've come representing a student, I want you to think about that student. I want you to think about when they were just a wee little baby. Okay, open your eyes, time's up. They are now grown and ready to go to college, ready to apply for financial aid. For my high schoolers, can I get a sense also, if you're a high schooler or if you're the parent of a high school, any freshmen or freshman parents, sophomores or sophomore parents, juniors or junior parents, any seniors? All right. So for my seniors, it goes by so quick. Like you flash, like you were just starting high school and now you're a senior. It goes by really fast. And I say that to say the FAFSA, and I'll probably mention this again, but the FAFSA can sometimes, filling out any federal application isn't like my idea of fun. So the FAFSA can definitely have its moments where it's like, whoa, I'm tired of filling this form out. Please know, if you forget everything I shared tonight, please know that myself and many other financial aid professionals at UW-Madison throughout the city are here to support you, are here to help answer your questions. We can meet with you individually, via Zoom, in person, over the phone, whatever works best. So please know that we're here to support you. And these are just a few memes because I love memes. The first one, in case you can't see it, he's saying, I don't know what a FAFSA is, and at this point, I'm afraid to ask. You came to the wrong place because you're going to find out. And then the Squid Games. I don't know if anybody else watched the Squid Games during COVID, but I sat through it, and it says, for the next game, you must enter the FAFSA ID and password. We will get all into that, and when you create one, you'll understand why the Squid Games is there. And then that's the face you make when you finally get it done. It's such a satisfying feeling. All right, let's start with the Federal Student Aid ID. It's also known as creating a student aid account, so either whatever terminology you use. An FSA is an acronym. We use many acronyms in the world of higher education. It stands for Federal Student Aid Identification. The parent will need one and the student will need one. And you will use this Federal Student Aid ID or studentaccount.gov account. You will use this every single year you complete the FAFSA. If you have multiple children, the parent will use this multiple years throughout until their student is done applying for FAFSA. And students, you can be filling out a FAFSA from the time you senior in high school until, let's say, you decided to go on through a PhD program. So you could be using the same username and password year after year. This is your electronic way of signing the financial aid application. So everyone must create one. As you might have heard, FAFSA is going through some changes, so the FAFSA for this year has not been released. It's typically released October 1st. So just know that most schools have probably either released or done away with their priority dates or some of their mandatory dates of when you submit the FAFSA. So keep that in mind because the FAFSA will not open, we're told, until probably December 31st. So for my seniors, you will be completing the FAFSA hopefully December 31st or sometime in January. For my juniors in the room or anyone younger, your student will be completing the FAFSA hopefully by October 1st. October 1st is when it generally opens. And what I tell students, especially if you have your phone on you, bookmark that date, put a calendar reminder, know that December 31st, hopefully the FAFSA opens for my seniors, and October 1st is when the FAFSA will open for our juniors who will be seniors next year. Again, the student will create one and the parent will create one. A question we often get is which parent, first, what constitute as a parent, and then which parent will complete the FAFSA. I'll speak a little bit more about that real quick. What constitute as a parent? So the parent is either the biological parents of the student or the adoptive parents that live with the student. A parent, if you have legal guardianship of a student, then for financial aid purposes, you do not create one. And for financial aid purposes, you wouldn't be included on the FAFSA. But if you are the biological parents or the adoptive parents, then you will be creating a federal student aid ID. If the parents are separated and not living in the same household, the parent that will create a federal student aid ID is the parent that provides the most financial support for that student. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then again, the student will create an account. It is super important that the student use an email not associated with their school email address, because once you leave probably Monona Grove, you'll no longer have access to that email. So it's important that you use a different email. Parents will also need their separate email. So a few things about the FAFSA or the free application for federal student aid. It's a free application. You do not have to pay anyone to fill this out. If you need help or support, again, myself and others can help you with it. Parents you'll need parent information. And I know sometimes I'll speak to students and they're like, well, my parent's not really gonna help me. Do I need to include their information? For the most part, most students will need their parent information on the FAFSA. The few exceptions are if you're over the age of 24, you no longer need parent information. If you are married and under the age of 24, no longer need parent information. If you have a child that you support more than 50%, no longer need parent information. If your parents are deceased or you're a ward of the court or things like that, then you no longer need information. But for the most part, most students will need parent information on the FAFSA until the age of 24. You'll need the school code for the school that you're looking to apply to and that you want your information to be sent to. On the FAFSA, you can add up to 20 different schools. And the other thing to keep in mind is that you complete the FAFSA every single year, so it's not just a one time and done. Some things to consider, to keep in mind. It's completed online. It is different than the CSS profile. CSS profile is an application that many private schools might use to gauge your financial situation, where they might ask things like the value of your home or other assets that you have. UW-Madison does not use CSS profile, this application. It is available again for this year on December. We are told December 31st will be the release date, but that is not definitive. There is no priority deadline at UW-Madison for this year. Typically, our priority deadline is December 1st, so we ask students, because it opens in October, that students complete it by December 1st. All contributors need a student gov account, which is the federal student aid ID. So as the parent and the student, you will be called contributors. And as a contributor, again, you must create a federal student aid account, or also known as an FSA ID. The FAFSA uses tax information from prior years, so oftentimes I will hear from families, well, I haven't done my taxes yet, so I can't even do it. Good news, it's prior taxes. So for my seniors in the room, your parents and your taxes, the ones that you'll be using, is from 2022. From my juniors in the room, the taxes is the money that's being earned this year in 2023. So it's always 2 years prior. Sometimes I'll have students, well, my parents don't earn enough to even file taxes. Can I still complete a FAFSA? Yes, you can still complete a FAFSA. Well, how about we own a business and we're a little bit delayed and we haven't even filed taxes for 2022. You can still file a FAFSA using estimated information. I do encourage you, if you are looking to fill out the upcoming year's FAFSA, get your taxes done because it will save you a lot of time when filling out the FAFSA. So if you're a senior, kind of just a brief timeline, you're applying for college, hopefully now in the fall, you're completing the FAFSA December, January, and again, you're using tax information from 2022. What you need, again, the parent and the student, you both need that information. You both must create an account at studentaid.gov. You'll need social security number or alien registration number if you are not a US citizen, but you are a resident. You will need, and I tell students this often, I know sometimes we have those numbers memorized, but sometimes when you're sitting down filling out a federal form, it's very easy to like mix up the numbers or for whatever reason, just mix something up. So I tell students, especially if you've just learned it, have the card in front of you when you're creating the FSA ID account. I encourage families that are seniors, this would be, even though the FAFSA hasn't opened up, I encourage you to create this account today or sometime soon, within the next week or two. And I say that because when the FAFSA opens up, if you've not created an FSA ID, you're not going to be able to use it. It's going to take several days. We're being told anywhere from 3 to 5 business days for your federal student aid ID account to be verified before you can even start the FAFSA. So when it opens up, if you create it now, once it opens up, you'll be able to do it. You'll need W-2 forms, earning statements, any records of money that you've earned. You'll also need bank statements. Oftentimes, the nice thing is many of us have that on our phones. Records of investments, records of untaxed income, if you have any untaxed income, and records of farm and business net worth. This is new for this year, so if you have older students where you've done a FAFSA, and let's say you own a personal business, for this upcoming school year, the FAFSA is asking for your assets. And the question is if you could have pictures of those things, and the answer is yes. Studentaid.gov account, don't use your high school email, as I said, because again, you don't want to lose this information, you don't want to be locked out. If you are divorced or separated, the parent who provides the most financial support. Oftentimes, I will hear from students and they'll tell me, my parents provide, it's usually either one extreme, my parents don't provide anything for me, or my parents provide the exact same amount. Who should I list? And again, the response goes back to the student or family. It's whoever provides the most financial support. So even if it's $1 more, that is the parent. Let's say it's very hard to decipher which parent that is. I ask students maybe whose health insurance are you on? Is there a parent that's paying a cell phone bill for you, or maybe gave you a little extra for the holidays? Whatever that thing that just took them over by a little bit, that would be the parent. Schools are not going to go on a witch hunt to like see, is this truly the parent? They're just asking which one provides the most financial support. If again, it is truly 50-50, everyone, it was split down the middle, then we're being told then it should be the one who earns the most that should be the custodial parent on the FAFSA, or what's being called the contributor. What if student is paying for everything? Do you still need parental support? And I know this one typically comes up more so for my college students. They're like, Jocelyn, my parents aren't giving me nothing. Again, until the age of 24, we will need parent information. So it is so important for parents to provide this information. You can say, all we want are the loans, so I don't want to provide any financial support, so that will be an option on the FAFSA. So if that is what you're interested in, that's fine, but please know the student does need your financial information. Some more tips and tricks. So the FAFSA will have what's called, and this is one of the big updates that's happening, it's gonna have a direct data exchange, and that means that inside the FAFSA, it is connecting your information with the taxes that you filed with the IRS. That information is highly, highly protected. We've been going through trainings where we are told not even with like written consent can we share this information with anyone. So know that your information is protected. But know that the FAFSA, because you filed taxes and you're filling it out and you're authorizing, will connect to the information on the IRS. So a lot of the information on your tax returns will directly be inputted into the FAFSA. The other one, and this one I take a deep breath as I say, sometimes it's glitchy. Plan ahead. I was maybe like a month or so, I was at a training with some folks from Federal Student Aid ID, and they were doing a demo of the upcoming FAFSA, and it was hysterical because the person like at Federal Student Aid was having trouble, and she was like, I don't know what's going on, and all of us in the audience are like, we know, because it's always like glitchy. So just know that sometimes it's glitchy. Some things that I've learned, if it's glitchy, if it locks you out, is take a deep breath. Number two, have your student be the driver of this. This is their financial aid. I know as parents, we're amazing parents. We love to help our students. We sometimes want to do so much for them. But I say, almost like if they were in driver's ed where you know you have to let them drive, let them be on the driver's seat, let them fill out the form. Obviously, they need your information, they need your support, but let them be the ones kind of leading that process. The other thing, sometimes you just need to clear your cookies on your computer, sometimes you need to use a different internet browser. Those are some things that sometimes help, but sometimes it's gonna lock you out and you're just gonna have to take a few days and then come back a few days later. So just know that sometimes it's glitchy. Not always. Sometimes a student starts it and finishes it, there's no glitches. So I'm not saying that there's gonna be glitches, but if there are, it's nothing out of this world. You will get through it. There's a great chat function that can be helpful, so just know that with each question, there's also usually like this little box that explains even, okay, what is this question asking me? What is, let's say it asks you for social security number and you weren't sure what that was. It'll pop up and tell you what that is. Let's say, for example, another thing to keep in mind, because it's using tax information from prior year, a lot can happen in a year, a lot can happen in a few months, a lot can happen especially 2 years prior. So if your financial situation has changed from the time you filed those taxes until the time you're attending school, know that you can reach out to the school and let the school know we've had these changes. Maybe there's been a change of income, maybe we got a new job or there's been a job loss. Whatever those changes are, you can report those to the school and the school can take those into account, those changes. So something else that is new for the upcoming school year is that distributions to a 529 plan that are owned by non-custodial parents are no longer to be reported on the FAFSA. The custodial parent would only need to report 529 plans as an asset if the student is the named beneficiary of the plan. And if you ask me this later, I might have to come back to this slide because I haven't memorized that yet. Assets and some frequently asked questions regarding assets. You do not need to report retirement investments. You do not need to report the value of your home under assets, the home that you live in. However, you do need to report the net worth of any small business or farm. The way that we calculate asset is what the value of that asset is minus whatever debt you have against it. Same with any rental property that you might have. You're looking at the value, if it's a rental property that you don't live in, that you're renting out, the value of that property minus any debt. The answer to that would be what the asset is. So for my seniors, we have this wonderful event called College Goal Wisconsin. College Goal Wisconsin is an opportunity to get help completing your financial aid application. My favorite thing about College Goal is that simply for attending, you'll be entered into a scholarship drawing. These are some dates that are happening locally. And there's also a QR code. The event happening on the 31st is a virtual event, and it's specific for Spanish speakers. But at many of these events, there will be folks that are bilingual as well. So the soonest one, in case it's too small, is going to be January 8th, but I think you all have copies as well. So after you file, you've completed your FAFSA, you're gonna get what's called a student aid report. The student aid report is gonna give you what your student aid index. Does anybody have older children already in college? All right, so in the past, the student aid report for this current year, it's called an expected family contribution. The name is super confusing because often parents just thought, okay, is that what I'm expected to contribute? Because if so, this is more like an expected fantasy contribution. It is no longer going to be called an expected family contribution. It's going to be called a student aid index, because that's what it is in fact. It's an index number. Based on that index number is what a student is eligible for. And a quick way to explain, the higher that index number, the less potential financial aid that student may be eligible for. The lower that index number, the more financial aid that student might be eligible for. For this upcoming school year, there will even be negative student aid index numbers. So the lowest that it can be for this upcoming school year could be up to a negative 1,500. However, a negative 1,500 and a 0 will be the same thing. Why the federal government did that, I don't know, but it will be the same. So you will get that number, you'll see what you might be eligible for, and you may be selected for a process called verification. Verification is a process that the federal government does where they want to just make sure that the information you provided on the FAFSA is accurate. So they might ask you to confirm how many people are part of your household, or if for whatever reason you weren't able to use the data exchange where the information went straight from the IRS to your FAFSA. They might ask you for a copy of, say, a W-2 or a tax return. So that might happen, so it's important that students keep an eye on their emails, because this information is going to be emailed to the student, not the parent. So even though we're requesting parent information, the student is the one who will get the email. Students can add up to 20 schools. In the past, it used to be up to 10 schools. For the upcoming school year, you can add up to 20 schools, and you can change those later on. Other things to keep in mind is if there is a special circumstance, so like I said, if there's been a change in your family's financial situation, know that you can reach out to the school. You will have to reach out to schools individually. So say your student is thinking of like 3 or 4 different schools, like those are the top contenders. It would probably be sending those schools an email or asking them what is the process to report a special circumstance, say a job loss or a change in the financial situation of the family. Students receive their financial aid offer once they are admitted, so oftentimes we might get students, I was accepted to UW, where's my financial aid offer? So please know for my seniors, parents of seniors, hopefully this will not be the case moving forward, but because of all the changes happening with the FAFSA, we're told it potentially, hypothetically, is going to open the 31st. However, we might not receive any of the information for the FAFSA probably like until a month later. And there's some information that we might not even be able to access or do anything with until even later. So at the very earliest, from places like UW-Madison, you may not receive a financial aid offer, even if you were an early admit, until sometime in late February. And it can be even later. So just keep that in mind. It's because of the changes that happened to the FAFSA. You can, however, use what's called the net price award calculator. Every school and college has what's called the net price award calculator. You can plug in your student aid index into that net price award calculator and get just a sense of what financial aid you might be able to expect at that school. So it's a good estimator. Again, I kind of talked about some of this, but it is just an index number. That index number will be used to calculate what a student might be eligible for. And kind of the formula that's used is going to be the student's cost of attendance, so at the school that they're thinking of attending. So for example, UW-Madison, cost of attendance for a Wisconsin resident is roughly $28,000-$29,000. Minus whatever the student aid index is going to give you what the student's financial need is. So say, for example, a student has an expected family contribution of negative $1,500. Cost of attendance is $28,000. Their federal need is going to be $28,000 at UW-Madison. If their cost of attendance, let's say, is $10,000 their student aid index is 10,000, and the cost of attendance, again, is at 28,000, then their federal need is gonna be about, what was that? I can't talk and calculate in my brain real quick. 18,000. So for that student, one is gonna have a much higher federal need, another one is gonna have a much lower federal need. So based on those differences, a student's financial aid will be offered, and it can look different. Some other things to think about when thinking about the cost of attendance, and each school has a different cost of attendance. So a cost of attendance can vary based off if you're coming to UW-Madison, or let's say you're thinking about a school in Michigan, or you're thinking about a private school, or you're thinking about a community college, your cost of attendance will vary. However, your student aid index is not gonna vary. That's the constant that stays the same regardless of what school you attend. In the cost of attendance, some things to keep in mind: tuition and housing, or at the campus, those are direct costs that you will have to the university. Some indirect costs when looking at the full cost of attendance could be like course materials, personal expenses, transportation, or loan fees. So oftentimes when speaking to families about that big cost of attendance is what are gonna be the direct costs versus the indirect costs. And okay, student has completed their financial aid application, they got their student aid index, they understand the cost of attendance at the school. What kind of financial aid could a student be eligible for? So there are different types of grants and scholarships. The largest federal grant is called the Pell Grant. Oftentimes schools will use that as a measure of socioeconomic status, and based off Pell Grant, student might be eligible for other scholarships or other grants as well. Some schools have institutional grants, so grants that come from that school, and then there are many private also organizations and scholarships that offer based off these things as well. The beautiful thing about grants is it is free money. It is not money that must be repaid. Scholarships also, these are some trusted sites that students should be looking at, should be applying to scholarships. And the scholarships obviously can vary. Some will ask for FAFSA information. They might ask for what the student's aid index is, or they might ask for certain elements of the FAFSA. So I just encourage you, make sure you're looking at scholarships, make sure you're also not paying anyone to do this work for you, because many of these things are free. If it sounds too good to be true, feel free to check it up against us, and we're happy to take a look at it as well. The other type of financial aid that a student can be offered are loans and employment. Loans obviously means it's money that you borrow to go to school, and then when you graduate, you'd be repaying those loans. Some of the different types of loans that are available are federal student loans. And I tell parents and families, oftentimes I'll be told, well, my family, we don't qualify for any financial aid. And here's the thing, everybody qualifies for financial aid. If you are a US citizen or a resident, and you fill out the FAFSA and you're going to a school, you would qualify. You might not qualify for grants, which is free money, but everyone qualifies for at least federal student loans. Federal student loans, oftentimes they do have lower interest rates than some other options. And the other nice thing about federal student loans is that their repayment, you defer those payments until after you graduate. During the pandemic, all federal loans, they were paused where students didn't have to pay. Whereas like if you didn't have a federal loan, if you had a private loan, you still had to pay those regardless of the pandemic. So the borrowing from a federal loan oftentimes has nicer conditions. So if you need money to go to school, this would be a good option. There's also loans called Parent Plus loans that the parent gets in their name for the student to go to school. There's also institutional. Some schools might have loan programs that they could offer you. And there are private loans that you could get from a bank or a lender. And then the last thing that you could potentially qualify by completing a financial aid application is what's called work study. Work study is a job that the student would get on campus, and with the money that they earn, they can use to cover their personal expenses. Just because a student does not qualify for work study does not mean that the student cannot get a campus job. At UW-Madison, you do not need work study to get a campus job. There are many students without work study that are working on campus. Just quick regarding Federal student loans. There are some loans, and these are based on the student's federal need, is subsidized and unsubsidized. So if there's federal need, then the student could qualify for a portion of their loans being subsidized. I think of like a sub sandwich, which is like a good thing. A sub loan or a subsidized loan is a good loan because it is interest-free while the student is in school. Interest and repayment on a subsidized loan begins 6 months after a student graduates. Unsubsidized loans, those loans have interest that accrue from disbursement until repayment. You don't have to pay anything until 6 months after the student graduates, but those have interest that are accruing. The maximum for a student's first year is $5,500, second year is $6,500, and their third and fourth year is $7,500. Those amounts typically get split between fall and spring semester and can be applied to tuition and other expenses. These are the interest rates for this year. Interest rates are set by Congress during the summer, so for next year, we are yet to see what will happen. And I bring up this point because oftentimes it's like we at the school don't come up with these interest rates. These are set by Congress, which is why it's important to stay involved in politics, even if we don't like it. There's also an origination fee. That's a small fee that's taken right off the top of the loan before the loan is dispersed. Just some differences between a Parent Plus loan and a private student loan. A Parent Plus loan is very similar to that unsubsidized loan we talked about. The one difference is it's in the parent's name. The parent can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus any financial aid that the student is receiving. The Parent Plus loan typically has a much higher interest rate, so it's at 8.05%. It is fixed for this current school year. And there is a much higher origination fee, so 4% comes off the top of this loan. I do have some families that take out Parent Plus loans every single year, and they kind of take it on almost like a payment plan where although they can defer the payments on this loan, they pay it off within that year so that next year they know they have to take out a Parent Plus loan, they'll pay it off so that the student's not graduating and leaving the parent with massive student loan debt. There's also private loans that a student can get from a bank or a credit union. I will pause quickly and just emphasize my rule of thumb. If you do need to borrow money to go to school, it's not the worst thing in the world. Many of us grown adults, we borrow money to buy a car because we needed a car and it was an essential thing for us. A car depreciates in value. A degree typically does not depreciate in value. So if you need to invest in yourself and borrow to go to school, do it smartly. My rule of thumb is you never want to borrow more than you will make your first year out of college. So what does that mean? That means, and the other thing is like, when I went to college, I had no idea I'm going to be a financial aid person in the future. So it's hard to tell, but I would encourage you, go to my best friend Google like 3, 4, 5 different majors. What does someone with this major make first year out of college? And no more than that do you want to borrow over your 4 or 5 years at school. And the reason I say this is I speak with a lot of students who come from other states. And I told you the cost at UW-Madison for a Wisconsin resident is roughly $28,000. For my friends from Illinois, their cost of attendance is roughly $60,000. And I will see students and families borrowing $60,000 in 1 year to come to UW-Madison. And I tell them with all the love in my heart, that is not a wise financial decision. As much as I love UW-Madison, I don't recommend that to anyone. But this is my dream schools. He works so hard. He deserves this. We just don't know how to tell him no. Like, this is the school he's going to. And I'm like, I encourage you, sit down, whatever your school you're looking at. As an in-state resident, tuition is less if you stay in Wisconsin. But if you want to go somewhere else, just know it might cost more. Or at a private school, it might cost more. Oftentimes, I have many friends who were first-generation college students. They were the first in their families to go on to college, and they had no one guiding them. So they went to some private school because you're the first one, and we're so excited that you got into college. And now they're with $100,000 of student loan debt. I don't recommend that to any student. I'm happy, like I said, to sit down with you. Even if you're not coming to UW-Madison, I'm happy to look at your financial aid offers, happy to talk to you through it. I know it can be very hard, and I speak from experience talking to a teenager about not making a right decision. But I'm happy, sometimes having an external party, someone who's not related to the family, just talk through it. So we're happy to do that with you. Next steps, filling out the FAFSA. Again, make sure you create the federal student aid ID, both yourself and the parent, both the student and the parent. Make sure you have all the documentation and paperwork that you will need, and start identifying what schools you might want to add on your FAFSA. I'm going to briefly talk about some programs that we have at UW-Madison, and I'll go through them super quick. You have the slides. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. First one is called the Bucky's Tuition Promise. This is for Wisconsin residents who can fill out the financial aid application whose household income is $65,000 or less. If this is you, your tuition at UW-Madison will be paid. This is not paid with state dollars. This is paid with institutional funds, private donors. So know that if this is you, your tuition at UW-Madison can be covered. Bucky's Pell Pathway. I talked about the Pell Grant. If you qualify for the Pell Grant, then not only is your tuition covered at UW-Madison, but we will meet your full financial need. This is to dispel the myth that there's no way my family can afford, my mom, she's the only one that works, my dad is sick, and there's all this stuff happening, there's so many kids in the family. Know that if you qualify for the Pell Grant, your entire financial need at UW-Madison can be covered. The last one is called the Badger Promise. This is a promise for students who are first-generation college students. This has nothing to do with families' income or if you qualify for the Pell Grant. But if you are first-generation, which means neither parent has a four-year college degree, you are considered first-generation. As a first-generation college student that transfers to UW-Madison from either Madison College or another UW system school, your first year of tuition at UW-Madison will be covered. This is our contact information. Like I said, we would be happy to sit down with you. We're not too far from you either. We are open, even usually we're closed like a week or two during the break, but other than that, we are open. So happy to connect with you if you have questions. I will open it up for any questions that you have now.